Hey guys, so welcome to the fifth episode, season 3 of the Teen Whisperer Show, where we get to hear the stories and experience of podcasters and what are the problems that they are facing and how to overcome it. Today we have a guest from UK, and actually I would like to give an intro in his style. Like he's a dad. I don't have the accent, but this is actually what he always says. He's a dad, and he has a podcast called Dadboss Audio, and he was one of my clients before. So guys, let's welcome Mr. Charley Jones. Charlie, Charlie, welcome to the show. So, please tell a little bit about yourself and your podcasting career.
Jeff, thanks for having me on. It's really nice to be a guest on your show. For those listening, Jeff used to really help me out with my podcast and with my marketing for Dadboss Network, which is my kind of social media project, if you like. I guess it all started back in October last year. I am a dad. I've got a full-time job, and I've always been someone who likes self-development, self-improvement, but I really struggled for time, as any parent will understand. So I embarked on a mission to get up at 4 a.m. every morning so that I could spend some time working on myself before I had to go to work and without sacrificing time in the evenings with my family. And that very quickly developed into Dadboss Network and the podcast, Dadboss Audio as well. And the whole purpose of it is really just to reach as many dads as possible who are just like me, to inspire them to go after their dreams, because I believe that it's only by us as dads going after our own dreams and pursuing our own passions that we'll truly teach our children how to pursue theirs and not to settle in life.
Yeah, I totally understand it. And recently I think you actually gave kind of an interview, I think so, to another podcast called Mommy Voice, I think.
Yeah, so I just did a short little video, and it was very much saying what I've just said there. As parents, we want the best for our kids. We do. We absolutely want the best for them. But the truth is, we sometimes overprotect our children with love. Our kids may come to us and say that they've got a dream of being an actor or being an astronaut, and as parents we don't want to see them fail. And you see it all the time where parents go, oh, don't reach that high, don't want to do that, because they don't want to see their kids fail, they don't want to see their kids get hurt. But in actual fact, all you're doing is teaching your kids to settle. So I truly believe that for our kids to pursue their dreams, they need to see us going after ours. And it doesn't even matter if we fail. Just the act of them seeing us going after it is enough to show them to go after their own.
Yeah, exactly. And recently I actually explored this. One of my podcast guests actually you asked me this question. To ask whoever who are getting onto your show, is that who was the last person that you made them smile? Okay, so who was it? Do you have any person like that?
Who's the last person I made smile? My mum, actually, the other day.
Wow.
So
that's totally out of the box.
No, my mum's not been very well. We haven't seen her throughout the whole lockdown period, and so she's actually just been given the all clear. Remember, we were able to go and see her on Thursday, and the most important thing, my daughter being able to see Nanny Paula on Thursday. So I didn't make her smile. Actually, my daughter made her smile. But to see that kind of happiness, you can't buy that. You can't get that.
Wow, mate, that's really great. And guys, the guest that he has on this podcast is actually totally unique, because once I was editing a video for you, who actually was a security guard, and he was actually security for Ed Sheeran, I think so. He was actually for that. So yeah. Right. I was really astonished. Like when I was hearing and editing, I mean, like, wow. I mean, like, that's the thing, man. How do you actually get those people onto your podcast? I mean, like, when they come onto your show, what was actually their expectations?
Sure. So, I mean, look, I'm very new to podcasting, and I think the important, well, in terms of finding guests, I'm using social media. It's people I know or people I'm coming across and networking with via Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. I've started contacting people who I see who just inspire me, and I've been contacting famous people and just seeing if they'd be interested in coming on the show. I'd say don't be afraid to contact anyone. You never know, you might just catch that on the right day and they just say, hey, do you know what, I love what you're doing, I'll give you some time. And in terms of when you're saying expectations, do you mean theirs, or what are my expectations
Yeah,
of a
yours.
guest?
Yours. Like when you are inviting your, what's your expectation of them?
For me, I just want them to share their story.
Mm.
As I say, it's about inspiring other dads. So, for example, the guest you were talking about, Kyle, he is a dad. He works a
Yeah.
full-time job as a security guard, but he also has a huge social media platform.
Mm.
He's got 160,000 followers on Facebook. But for me, the big thing for him is he has a Facebook group of about 10,000 dads from around the world
Mm.
who openly share their frustrations and their feelings, and when they're
Yeah.
feeling low, and supporting each other. So for me, the best part of that interview was hearing about that and where that had come from.
Yeah, exactly. And you always like say this, that he's a dad in your podcast whenever it's starting. He's a dad, and is there any specific reason, like from your background? This kind of personal question, like from your background, your father and everything. Like, um, is there anything that inspired you to do this from your father's side?
Yeah, I mean, you may, if you've listened to some of the podcasts, you may have heard my own story.
Yeah.
I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. He
Mm.
certainly was no example of how to be a father, and because of that, I was actually terrified of being a dad. Um, I actually used to visit my dad in prison when I was
Mhm.
very little, and he disappeared when I was 13. I haven't even spoken to him for over 20 years now. So for me, being a dad at first was terrifying, and now it's something that I want to do to the best of my ability. I want to be the best dad I can and set the right example for my daughter, set an example that I was never given.
Yeah, and how is it affecting your your personal life? Because people most of the times when they're doing podcasting, they talk stuff like you being a dad boss, audio like podcaster, you should always talk about being a great dad and all. So is it actually affecting in your personal life, or are you actually executing? Is it possible when you position your podcast like that and to implement that? Is it possible to implement in your personal life as well?
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, there's no such thing as a perfect dad. We're all
Yeah.
learning this as we go along. You know, you see a lot of mum content out there, and
Mhm.
supporting mums. Mums are naturally maternal. It's built into their DNA. For dads, it's different.
Yeah.
And to be a good dad, you just, I believe, have to show love, compassion, understanding, acceptance. And if you just work off of those four basic principles, I think everything else will just work itself out. You've just got to start with love. I've made loads of mistakes as a dad, and I'm going to make
Mm.
lots and lots more. But I'm really humbled and blessed that I get to speak to some really inspiring dads from around the world through the podcast, through Dad Boss Network, and I get to learn some of the things that they do and see what works for me as well. And I'll be honest with you, the lockdown has been, at first I found it really difficult. I've
Yeah.
not spent so much time with my daughter,
Mm.
literally stuck in a house together. But I think the first 4 weeks were really difficult. After that, I really started to understand the blessing that I'd just been given, because that amount of time, I'm never going to get that with her again. I'm never going to
Yeah.
have 10, 11 weeks that I can just spend at home with my daughter. So I learned to make the most of that time. And I saw a lot of other dads doing the same. And I think there's a lot of dads out there that are better now than they were before lockdown started.
Yeah, I think because even in my house, it's like every single time when my father comes in, I always accept like, did he bought something? I mean, like whenever dads come home, they always have this expectation like, did he got something? Did he got something for me? And in lockdown, when everyone is at home, I mean, like he doesn't get out of my house, so when can I get anything back? So yeah, I think it's actually, and I was actually talking to one of the podcasters that I'm going to interview in the future date, and he was actually mentioning that the podcast listening has actually reduced
Yeah,
during this
absolutely has.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your take on that? How's your stats going on in that?
Yeah, my stats did drop. And, I think if you look at how podcasts are consumed, a
Mm.
lot of people consume podcasts on their commute, whether they're sitting on a train or a bus, or they're driving to work. I listen to podcasts when I'm driving.
Mm.
And of course, with the number of people off work and the number of people working from home, those commutes have now gone.
Yeah.
So even the people who are working from home, they're not saying, oh, well, let's use that hour that I used to drive
Hmm.
and listen to a podcast. They're actually working that time. Instead, a lot of people you'll find are
Yeah.
probably working longer hours than they did before. So actually the number of podcast listeners reduced, and the amount of people consuming video went up dramatically
Mm.
because people decided they had time to look at the screen. And that's probably why during lockdown you would have seen a lot more Facebook lives and Instagram lives
Yeah.
rather than podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. And YouTube actually reduced the, HD version and the 2K version. I don't know whether it's actually happened in your country, but here the videos won't go up to like more than 480 pixels. If you go to YouTube and you saw a video which was like a 4K video before, you can't go more than 480 pixels now. So because
No,
lots of people are consuming, yeah, it's also happening there also.
content. Netflix did it. Amazon Prime did it, YouTube did it. They had to because the number
Yeah.
of people consuming the content went up, and their servers, despite how big and powerful they are, they just couldn't handle that amount of traffic.
Yeah, the bandwidth is like it's going crazy, and people are also working at home. They're also consuming everything, and it's totally
Yeah.
was going crazy. And mate, actually, really want to ask you this because your podcast is really niche oriented. Okay, it's mostly of dads who just want to share and everything. So, how do you actually use the promotion strategies? Like how do you possibly share it and get number of views? Because like literally like I don't know, maybe 60% of the whole world maybe because of that, maybe even because some of the even if people at my age or actually listening to the podcast, they can be that okay, I shouldn't be like my father, he was a total idiot and he tortured me, so I shouldn't torture my children. So how should you actually do the promotions? I mean, like about your listeners, so do you just send out your dads or someone related to that? So tell me more about promotional stuff.
Yeah, it's really, well, I'll tell you what, when I figure it out, I'll give you the true strategy. It's new. I've got a very small number of listeners at the moment,
Mm-mm.
and I'm still working on promotion. And I think the same as with this, the same as anything, it takes time to build an audience.
Yeah.
But obviously I have the Dad Boss Network platform where I have a 77% of my audience are dads aged between 25 and 65 really.
Wow.
So I'm already building the platform there. And then depending on the type of content within a specific podcast will
Mm.
tell me where I'm promoting it. Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn if there's something more business related in there?
Yeah.
YouTube, if there's some good video content coming off of a podcast, then I will get it up on YouTube. For example, I'll be asking you for a copy of this whole thing to get it on YouTube.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the content within the podcast, taking clips out of that, using
Mhm.
relevant hashtags to try and attract the right audience, promoting at the right times, and just working from there. And over time I know that audience will grow. I think sometimes it's tempting, because I've been doing this a few months now. You see people, they'll start something and after 3-4 months, they're not getting a big number of
Yeah.
listeners. So okay, I'm doing something wrong. I must broaden. And personally, I think that's a
Mm-mm.
mistake because it's the patience that will get you to where you want to be. Stay in your lane, stay with what you're passionate about, stay true to yourself. And, the truth is, it's better to have 100 people that are actively engaged than 10,000 who don't really give a shit. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm allowed to swear, but
It's okay. I can put a beep onto that. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah. I mean, really, because the people that you brought in, like, it's actually really amazing. Because when I was editing the Kyle podcast, I actually remember that he actually drove from all the way, I think, Philly, I think. So I exactly remember the place. He actually drove from there to your home to record the podcast. So yeah, I mean, like, what made him do that? Because he has to charge for the petrol amount, petrol or gas or in your language. So that's one, and effort and all. So what actually you made him do that? Because it's not easy to inspire people to come to your home and record a podcast. It's definitely not easy.
it's not. I mean, it's hard to get people onto a Zoom call, never mind getting them to come to your home. I'll be honest, it wasn't anything I did. That was Kyle. He is a genuinely good person, and he wanted to be involved and he wanted to spread his message because he's passionate about it,
Yeah.
because it's true to who he is and he believes in it. So he was willing to drive an hour and a half from his home to come to my home and record that show. And we've become friends, and I think that's one of the really important things about podcasts and about these kind of networks. You'll meet people from all around the world and you'll become friends. I stayed in contact with pretty much everyone I've recorded
Yeah.
with. I have regular video calls with them. Most of my guests are actually from the States or Canada. So, having regular calls with them, and I'm pretty sure that once all this is over, we've all got somewhere that we can go and go on holiday and meet each other and, catch up and that kind of thing. So again, if you've got the right guests, they will be willing to work with you. I think if you have to really fight to get somebody onto your show, and by fight, I don't mean you have to message them 10 times. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can just feel like, it's not that they don't really want to do it, don't have them on. Make sure you stay true again to your show and stay true to your listeners, because they're the people that you're doing this for. And if someone doesn't feel interested, they don't want to make an effort, then move on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, there's no monetary benefit at start because people are spending like half an hour or 1 hour, recording a podcast. I mean, like, it's kind of worth like more money to them, but they are actually eligible because, growing podcasters like us, it's actually really hard to get those guests. People obviously don't see the benefit. Like, what's the point of getting onto that? So I think that's one of the like best thing, like no judgments, like who is he and what kind of thing he does. No judgments, just getting onto the podcast. I think that's really amazing thing when it comes to podcasting is. So one final question before closing it is that what do you think is the best tip in the whole world that you can give to a fellow podcaster in order to grow, according to your version? That's yours.
Don't give up. Again, when you get to 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and you've still got 20, 30, 700 people listening to your podcast, and really what you want is, a few zeros at the end of that listener count, don't give up. Make sure you keep doing what you're doing, because it takes time. Be patient, focus on the quality and just getting out there and getting the right people on. And just remember, if you inspire one person with an episode, then you're doing some good out there. Just stick with it.
Wow, that's totally good, guys. So we've actually like discussed more about guest and how to get guest people on the show, because his podcast is actually totally niche oriented. It's actually a really advantageous thing, because when you do something like that, the amount of listeners that is actually really big. Because if you're doing a normal podcast like an hour long about discussing many things, rather than niche oriented, is actually really advantageous. And we talked about like how to actually encourage people to drive from all the way down to his home. And so that's actually something, it's actually inspirational. That I get goosebumps whenever I hear that, because I don't know, I haven't met a lot of people who would drive to my home to help me something with this without any monetary charges. So that's actually things we discuss. So make sure, guys, I leave the timestamps below, so you guys go and check that out. And thank you so much, Mr. Charles. And it's really great, amazing, connecting with you. I know you have been very busy in this schedule. So is there anything you want to ask me? Written?
No, not at the moment. I just want to say thanks so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to come onto your show. And to your guests out there, if someone is starting a podcast and wants some help around the marketing, then give Jeff a call, because he'll definitely help you out.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much for that. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next podcast.
Thanks, Jeffrey.